Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Whitaker, trauma specialist. And today I wanted to come in and just kind of circle back and talk about some of the basics. Because if you've been following some of my videos or watching or paying attention, you've probably realized that I use terms a lot like consciousness and conscious awareness and what does all of this stuff mean? What does it mean to be aware and to be consciously aware? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of these basic terms just to make sure all of you have the foundational piece so you understand where I'm building from in all of the information that I'm presenting with you. So let's go ahead and get started and give me a moment here because I'm going to share my screen. And I have a little PowerPoint today. So we're going to start talking about conscious. And the word conscious itself is an adjective, and it simply means to be awake and alert. So anytime we make a conscious decision, it's quite deliberate because we're awake and alert when we're doing it. Now, on the flip side of conscious is unconscious. And unconscious is largely where the subconscious or unconscious mind lives. And that aspect of the mind is largely nonverbal. And so sometimes there are nonverbal cues that are being sent from the body up to the brain that are affecting and impacting our decisions beneath our conscious awareness. And so when some of these unconscious impulses affect our decisions, then not all of our decisions are deliberate because they're not coming from that conscious space. So I hope that helps clear up just a little bit about conscious and what that means. Now, consciousness is nothing more than a noun. It's taking conscious, which is an adjective, and turning it into a noun. And it's the state of being awake and aware of one's surroundings. And I would also like to expand and say it's not just the state of being awake and aware of one's surroundings, it's also the state of being awake and aware as to what's happening within yourself. Like, what are the impulses that are affecting and impacting your decisions. So that's the angle I'm looking at this from. So I'm taking the bigger concept of consciousness and helping narrow it down to where the perspective that I'm coming from. Next is conscience. And conscience is a noun spelled con-science, even though it's pronounced conscience. Now, conscience is an inner feeling or voice viewed as acting as a guide to the rightness and wrongness of one's own behavior. Now, if any of you have ever seen the movie Pinocchio, especially the Disney version, there's this cute little cartoon character called Jiminy Cricket. Jiminy Cricket is a personification of the concept of conscience because he's always hopping around and he'll kind of jump up and whisper in your ear and trying to like guide you to make the right decision. So Jiminy Cricket is meant to be a representation of conscience. And we all have this conscience inside of us. And the reason I wanted to put this slide in is because that conscience, that inner feeling, or some people experience it as an inner feeling, other people experience it as an inner voice. And sometimes this voice of conscience, especially in the current day and age, is getting all intermingled and confused with the ego. And I would like to propose that the ego that is talked about in a lot of spiritual circles isn't the bad thing that people think it is. It's like the way that the ego is talked about is kind of like taking Jiminy Cricket and flicking him off your shoulder, which doesn't do good for anyone. Next is awareness. And awareness is a noun. It's knowledge or perception of a situation or fact. So a person can be conscious, but not aware. However, you cannot be aware without being conscious. And then there's the concept of conscious awareness. And this is a term that I use a lot. So conscious awareness is a twofold state of being in which the mind is both awake as well as cognizant of its surroundings. So it's both a state of being awake and aware and alert to what's happening around you. And also what's inside of you, not just what's around you. So I also wanted to build into today's talk some exercises to help you start building this awareness if you want to. Now, I want to help. I want you to keep in mind a few things. As I go through these exercises, please know that I'm talking through the exercises. I'm not actually walking you through. You're not here in front of me, even on a Zoom call to interact with me. So I'm not getting any feedback. So keep that in mind, because there are ways that if I'm working with somebody directly, that if they're having trouble accessing one of these exercises, I can help them tweak it in the moment. And because I can't speak with you in this capacity directly, keep that in mind, that there might be ways to tweak these exercises, and some of you will figure out those tweaks on your own. Some of you will write this off as silliness, and some of you may reach out asking for help in how to tweak these exercises so they work for you. So please keep that in mind. So before I really get into the exercises, I want to talk about the why behind the exercises. And you can look up the 4 stages of competence, and you can find this basic information on Wikipedia. Because again, I'm just giving you some really scratch the surface information. So the 4 stages of competence are, the first stage is unconscious incompetence. The individual does not understand or know how to do something and does not necessarily recognize this deficit in themselves. In other words, you don't know what you don't know. They may deny the usefulness of a skill, saying, oh, that's silly, I don't need to know that. Or the individual must recognize their own incompetence and value the new skill before moving on to the next stage. So the length of time an individual spends in this stage depends on the strength of the stimulus to learn. And so a lot of people just don't have the stimulus to learn some of these skills. So we just don't know what we don't know. The next step is conscious incompetence. So though an individual does not understand or know how to do something, they recognize the deficit. The making of mistakes can be integral to the learning process at this stage. So conscious incompetence is whenever you step into learning a new skill. So for those of you who are going to step into learning some of the skills I'm going to present to you, there's going to be some conscious incompetence. You're going to be aware that, oh, I don't really have all of the skills to do these. I'm going to have to build these skills. If you've ever learned a sport, like basketball, whenever you first start to play basketball, you're really not that good because you're in the learning phases. And a lot of times we realize that what we don't know because we see the players who are better than us. And then that can help us get to the next stage, which is conscious competence. In this stage, the individual understands or knows how to do something. So once you get the basic skills of basketball down, then you know how to play basketball. So you're not thinking about how do I run and dribble at the same time, because that can be awkward if you're for the first time you ever pick up a basketball, or how do I get my feet and my hands so I can shoot? Conscious competence means you're not working on the motor skills. It all comes together. It all starts to happen. However, demonstrating the knowledge or skill requires concentration. So I can do some of the more complicated plays on the basketball court. I can do the teamwork, but I still have to think about it. And I still have to think, oh, I have to stop and, pass the ball to somebody else, or I have to turn around and be ready to receive the pass that's coming at me. So it can be broken down into steps, and there's heavy conscious involvement in executing a new skill at this stage. And these new skills could be a little bit more complicated than the basics that you learned in the last phase. And what we're hoping to get to is unconscious competence. And unconscious competence is when the individual has had so much practice with the skill that the skill has become what we call second nature, and it can be performed easily. And as a result, the skill can be performed while also executing another task. So the individual may be able to teach it to others depending upon how and when it was learned. Some people who have unconscious competence are really great teachers, while others are just really good at their craft and they might not have that teaching ability. So for unconscious competence, let's stick with basketball. Think of the best of the best. Think of people like, your NBA players, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, some of the big names. They have unconscious competence. And you don't have to be an NBA player to have unconscious competence in basketball. But we can see it in some of these players while they're running down the court and, they're doing all the things that they do, and they're still playing basketball, but they might be able to do some of these trick shots where they're jumping on a trampoline and like doing a flip before they, dunk the ball. That is a level of unconscious competence that's a little bit beyond what most of us ever get to. Now, when it comes to some of the skills that I'm showing you, it's very similar because all of these skills throughout the stages of competence are skills that get into our procedural memory. And our procedural memory is the memory that's held by the body. So it's like learning to ride a bicycle. If you learned as a child and you haven't ridden for 20 years, but you can take a bicycle 20 years later, it might be a little wobbly, but your body remembers and you still don't have to think about all the steps. That's unconscious competence, and because your body remembers how to ride a bike. So I'm hoping with some of these skills in self-regulation and regulating your nervous system that you can eventually get to that stage of unconscious competence where your body learns to regulate itself, where you don't have to think about it. So if you remember my video from a couple weeks ago when I talked about Dan Siegel's hand model and how the emotional part of the brain can cause us to flip our lid. And when we flip our lid, then our thinking and our rationality and our executive functioning goes offline. These are practices to help get your lid back on in a pinch whenever you need to be able to think in a stressful situation. So let's say that you're having a meeting with your boss, or maybe you're at a board meeting or at a team meeting at work. And a lot of times we bring our drinks in, and something's happening at this meeting and you start to get really activated and you start to flip your lid and you notice, and the first part is you have to become aware of when you're not fully there. So you can simply pick up your tea and take a drink. Now, the important part of taking a drink is being incredibly mindful and focusing your attention on the inside as you do it. So notice as the cup touches your lip, pay attention to the sensation and what it feels like as the liquid falls into your mouth. Pay attention to what's happening as your mouth receives the liquid, and then the muscles around your mouth and your throat and your tongue start to activate so you can swallow, and see if you can follow the liquid down your esophagus into your stomach. So the drink itself doesn't look any different than a normal drink would. The only difference is where your attention is focused. And what this does is by focusing on all of the sensations and following the liquid down your esophagus. And by the way, it takes longer than you would think for something that you swallow to get from the back of the mouth and top of the throat all the way down into the stomach. It brings your attention to yourself and to your body. And so you're focusing on your body. And as you focus on your body, then the body will start to regulate once it has your attention. Another thing you could do is in your mind, if you're an adult, you can count to 10 or count backwards from 20. You don't have to do this out loud. If you have a child in front of you who might be having a little bit of a meltdown, or a little bit of a flip their lid experience, you can help the child by counting with them, by helping them count to 10 or count backwards from 20 until they're able to get their lid back on and have a conversation about what just happened, what just shifted, what caused this sudden anger in you or this meltdown, or what's happening with you. So these are not only practices you can do for yourself, but they're ones that you can share with your loved ones. And the last one is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And again, with all of these, that mindfulness and focusing on yourself and focusing inside yourself as you're counting, forwards or backwards, or as you're doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is really important. So 5 is name 5 things. And again, this could be out loud, or in your head. So let's say you're in a stressful situation back in that boardroom, and you notice you're starting to flip your lid. For just a moment, shift your attention, look around that room. What name to yourself in your head? What are 5 things I can see? I can see the whiteboard with the writing on it. I can see the blue tie that my supervisor is wearing. I can see the notebook on the desk in front of me. I can see the cup of tea right in front of me. I can see my pen. What are 4 things that you can hear? I can hear the furnace as it kicks on. I can hear, like the air blowing through the furnace vent. I can hear the little kind of the tap, tap, tap of pens and pencils and as people are writing. So you kind of get the gist. What are 3 things that you can feel? I can feel my arms resting on the edge of the boardroom table. I can feel the chair under my bottom. I can feel my feet on the floor. What are 2 things that you can smell? I can smell my tea. I can smell, somebody got something in the microwave, but I can smell a little bit of a waft of that. I can smell the perfume or the cologne of, somebody else in the room, or the hairspray. And that could be, what is one thing you can taste? Maybe you take a drink of your tea or your soda or your water and actually literally taste something. Or it could be, what is one thing that I'm grateful for today? Or one thing that I'm excited or looking forward to? This 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 can literally be anything that you want them to be. But it's shifting the focus inside your mind and doing something to help get that lid back on. And once you realize that you're at a more reasonable, rational place, then you can rejoin the conversation. Another method is ground sound breath. And these, again, it's important to focus your attention on the inside. And a lot of times you'll see these practices where, people are guiding you to go into your meditation room and to close your eyes. And I believe in some of these practices being able to do them in the moment and on the go. So ground is simply keeping your eyes open and shifting your attention and your awareness to contact points. Where is your body making contact? If you're standing, it might just be your feet making contact with the floor or the ground or whatever surface you're standing on. I'm sitting right now, so I can feel my feet touching the floor. I can feel the chair under the back of my thighs, under my bottom. I can feel the chair touching my back. I can feel my hands touching the desk when I rest them in front of me. So as I focus my attention is going to the contact points that my body is making, and I'm focusing my attention on my body, not something else. Sound, what are things that I can hear? I can hear the traffic right now. And we talked about sound in the last one. Maybe you're hearing the motor of the refrigerator or the cat meowing in the background. And breath, focus your attention again on the inside to your breath. What's it doing? Is it shallow? Are you breathing in the upper respiratory area? Are you getting down into the lower respiratory area? Which means, are you feeling that lower rib cage expand and contract, and maybe even your belly expand and contract as you breathe in and out? And if you just noticed, even talking about my breath and shifting my attention into my breath caused that deeper belly expanding breath. And it was just kind of spontaneous that just happened. And so that's something that as you shift your attention to your breath, you're going to start to notice that happening with yourself, because those bigger belly breaths are what bring that relaxation into the body. So sometimes just shifting your attention to your breath will cause that type of change. And exercise. Exercise is a good way to build our capacity. And there's a reason that exercise is considered one of the best antidepressants or one of the best anxiolytics that's out there, because exercise is it's willingly choosing to experience a physiological fight or flight response in the body. So stop and think about this for a moment. What is a fight or flight response in the body? How do you know? What are the signs and symptoms? Well, increased heart rate is a sign of fight or flight. More shallow breathing, where your breathing is faster and more shallow. It's more in that upper respiratory area. A lot of times people sweat or get dry mouth and, a little bit of dehydration whenever they're in a fight or flight response. The palms will get kind of sweaty and clammy. Now, don't these sound like a lot of the symptoms that and when I say symptoms, I use that word really loosely, but aren't these the same things that you experience when you choose to exercise? You're choosing to increase your heart rate. You're choosing to have that shallower breath. You're choosing to sweat. You're choosing to have dry mouth and to have the need for more hydration. So, exercise is a way that as we choose to put our body into this physiological state, the mind isn't trying to make something up because the mind knows that we're exercising. And so, this is a way to build capacity for what we're able to handle in those physiological nervous system states. So I hope that helps you understand just a little bit more about some of these basic terms and to give you some exercises and practices that you can take home, and you can watch this video as many times as you want until you get some of these practices down. And if you're having trouble with it, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is in the links below. And if you find this information helpful, please subscribe, please comment, please like, and if you know anybody else who could find this information valuable, please share. I look forward to seeing you next time, everyone. Happy self-discovery.